Otherwise, it's difficult, I think. Welcome to the forum call for everyone. And I'm so happy that you are all here together in this, what you can call a kind of participating in the actor community. That's what we are together. And I love that. Welcome for everyone. Today we have a forum call of Betty, and I think Harry will tell something to introduce her within a few moments. And for now, I will ask your attention for the opportunity to participate in our conference in June. We have a very, very interesting conference. There is a teaser, a conference teaser. You can listen to some parts of what's in it in the conference in the next forum call. Put it in your agenda. It's at May 18, at the same time as today. So very happy to be here together with you. And join us at ACTOR, because ACTOR is the community for coach trainers and coach training organizations. Thank you. Holly, it's up to you now.
All right. Thank you, Anita. So yes, welcome everybody. Glad you can be here. And I would particularly like to welcome our speaker today, Betty Spruill. Hi, Betty. In the way of introduction, Betty is an impressive woman. There she is. She's a world-renowned executive coach, a management consultant, entrepreneur, and trainer with over 40 years experience in the field of transformational leadership. Right there, I could stop there and be like, wonderful, but I'll keep going. She's also a certified master NLP practitioner and a recognized thought leader in ontological, mindful, and ecological living. So Betty had the pleasure of doing her first ontological training with Dr. Fernando Flores, who some of you I know have had the pleasure of meeting and working with. She runs a ICF accredited coach certification program called Ideal Coaching, which deals with harmonizing the body, mind, and spirit. And she offers that in the United States and Mexico. She also co-founded Trainer Designs Global, which is a training and development company that's committed to the successful expansion of transformation trainers and speakers, which for the past 15 years has trained trainers who now facilitate workshops around the world for thousands of people. She's designed and facilitated transformational workshops in the domains of leadership, mastery, and effectiveness for people around the world. And in 2000, Betty adopted an entire village in Ghana and has raised thousands of dollars to bring coaching and training to the people of that community to develop vision, leadership, strategies, and practices of sustainability for the individual and for the community. She's a member of the Transformational Leadership Council that includes thought leaders from around the world and coaches. And Betty was awarded the Positively Powerful Woman Award in 2012. So I would love to hear what she has to say, and welcome everyone, and welcome Betty.
Well, thank you. And thank you for the invitation. And the invitation came through Ana Escalante out of Mexico and Elena. I think you know Elena. So I'm very appreciative and happy to be here this morning. Speaking and listening, I find, are at the heart of our lives together. And there's a lot about speaking, but not too much about listening and what listening is. And as I was preparing for today, I was thinking, what do I say? How do I say it? And then I caught myself and said, let's listen. What wants to be said, what wants to be communicated, and what is listening. And how do I participate with you, engage with you, so that our 40 minutes together are worthwhile? Because I want to make a promise to you that today, that we share in a way, both in speaking and listening, that we walk away having and can say, you know, it was good that we were here together. It wasn't just another call, just another speaker with a resume. You heard my resume, and I'm proud of my resume. And it's not my resume today that's going to make the difference with us. It will be how I communicate, meaning how I speak and how I listen in this 40 minutes. So as I was reading the ICF number 5, active listening, the core competency, and again, I was thinking, this is wonderful. It's great. Active listening. There's generous listening. There's empathic listening. And I'm pretty sure you could think of some more. All kinds of listening. And there are many skills and many tools that people have about listening. But what I wanted to address this morning is the notion of listening, the interpretive nature of what it is to be a human being. And as I speak right now, I'm asserting that you are hearing, that you're interpreting everything that I'm saying. Just listening itself brings with it an interpretation. And what I'm saying may not be what you are listening. It's what you're hearing, but it's not what you're interpreting in the way that I'm saying it. And as you can see as coaches, quite often that's where the mismatches happen. We think we're saying one thing, we say one thing and we think that people are listening it, but it's something entirely different. And so the work of mastery, as I see it, and the work of connection is to begin to listen to each other's worldviews. And to listen in a way that we can honor the listening of another person by listening our own listening, by listening our own interpretations. Something we're blinded to, I find. I worked in many countries, Mexico, many parts of Asia, Europe, Africa. And the gift has been is that I've had to learn how to listen different cultures, different interpretations, and also recognize that I'm blinded because interpretation itself is cultural, it's social. And I remember one time I was in Bali with a group of people and we were climbing this tree and one of the guides that was having us touring with us came rushing over, screaming, "Get off of that tree, get off of that tree, don't do that, don't do that." And he appeared to be angry. And we're going, what do we do, what do we do? And he said, you don't climb trees unless you get permission. A cultural interpretation that we had completely missed. So he said, I'm not angry at you, I just don't want you to get hurt because climbing trees without their permission can have you hurt yourself. So I thought about it. Now in my culture where I come from, we just climb on trees and if you get hurt because you fell. But it had nothing to do with the permission of the tree. And then when I studied with Fernando Flores in 1980, when linguistic distinctions were introduced, it altered my life in a profound way. It had me begin to listen my own interpretations, my own meanings, and to understand phenomenology and how the world occurs. And that the world occurs through a speaking and a listening, and that language itself is creative. And that the world is not a static world, but it's in our speaking and being together in our listening that our worlds are created. And in the creation of our worlds, then language becomes power. Like if I say to you, I love you, you could take it to mean many, many things. And then I could have it mean one thing, you have it mean one thing, but it's in that middle, it's in that vast emptiness between us where we begin to find meaning that will have us connect. I did a presentation a couple of weeks ago, and there was a question of what is love, which is one distinction, and then what do you say love is? So those are two entirely different conversations. What do you say love is, and what is love? And as we began to have the conversation, we started to notice that as soon as we say what something is, we stop listening. We stop listening to the other person because our interpretations just rush in and they take over. And when I stop listening, I'm finding I stop learning. And when I stop learning, I stop loving. And when I'm not with you in a way that I can listen completely, then what happens is the space is filled with all my existing interpretations, and I'm living in a kind of blindness that I'm not even aware of. So what is that? What happens to us human beings that we stop listening? What happens so that we start to live as if our interpretation is the only interpretation there is, even when we are as competent, as smart, and as bright as we all are? See, I noticed that myself as a coach and as a transformative leader, and also in my relationships. You know, sometimes my boyfriend will, say to me, "You're not listening." And I said, "Really? I'm the greatest listener in the world. How can you tell me I'm not listening? I know exactly what you're saying." So all of that goes on with us. Now, I'm going to read something to you just to demonstrate listening. And you can keep your eyes open or you can close them. And you may have heard this before. And if you've heard it before, it has to do with the past, which is okay because we can't get away from the past. And if you think you already know what's going to happen, then again, that's you interpreting even before I read what it is I say I'm going to read. And we can't help it. This is what happens. We interpret, we're interpretation all the way down. But the key is to begin to listen and be mindful of our interpretations. So this is a poem. In the village. In the village, in the village, in the village, life repeats itself. Life repeats itself. There is sunlight. There is darkness. The dark repeats itself. The light repeats itself. Planting repeats itself. Harvest repeats itself. Yet life is never dull. It packs on the drum hide of the night and is satisfied. It listens for the footfalls when the dogs bark. In the village, in the village, in the village. In the village, in the village, in the village. Life repeats itself. Life undoes itself. And then does itself up in the same guise. We are careful not to fail to repeat the same salutations, the same farewells our parents and our parents use. They are wise. We are small and the day long. Death comes but once, but when it comes to life, no one would be unwilling to repeat in the village, in the village, in the village. What showed up for you? What meaning did you bring to this? Anybody want to say?
There is so much meaning. This is Kathy.
I get it.
The repetition, yet the variety that is apparent when you are listening, when you are paying attention to what's going on. And within that repeating, I love the last line of nobody would be unwilling to repeat that cycle of death and birth. That was my interpretation. I'm interested in hearing others.
Me too. Great. Who else?
If I may, this is Nadine.
Hi, Nadine.
Hi, Betty. So to me, it's, I can see sort of not a contradiction, but almost. So depending on your perspective on life, the repetition might be boring, monotonous, and so on. But then if you're more into the appreciation, the gratitude, and the beauty and simple happiness, the repetition is reinforcing that as well. And so that repetition, the lightness and the darkness, it's exactly that contradiction. Yeah.
Okay. So that was the interpretation she brought to it. Anyone else?
This is Sharon.
Yes.
I was struck by the way that the actual structure of the poem gave as much meaning as the words, that the repetition itself had meaning and actually got me feeling that more than the words themselves.
That's what she brought.
Mhm.
What Sharon brought. Who else?
I felt the safety in repetition and cycles and predictability, so that it's something that can hold us.
Yeah, and that's what she brought. Now, in some people, when I read this poem, they see themselves in the village, and they have images of, what their village of a village life. Some people can even hear the dogs barking. Some people see faces appear of their parents and their grandparents. Words, but the words by themselves have no meaning. It's the listening of the listener that brings the meaning. And in that, so what are we speaking into? As I speak, I'm speaking into an already ongoing conversation of people's meanings, of people's how they're interpreting. So in the village, in the village, in the village. Now, some people have cried in listening to this poem. Some people have seen their lives from beginning to end in listening to this poem. And yet what it is are some words on a piece of paper. So it tells us then, what it tells me, is that words get interpreted in the listening of the listener. You are listening today in a particular way because you're coaches, been trained in this field. Now, if I were doing this for a group of attorneys, let's say, they would have a whole different listening as well. So when I can listen the listening of my audience, which means that it's my own listening as well, my own interpretation, then I can lean in a whole nother way. I can begin to do what they ask us to do with these competencies. It's to be present. Present to presence itself. And in the presence of presence, which, when I talk about mindfulness, I'm mindful that I'm bringing to this, what I call this disclosive space of possibility, language, meaning, which is interpretation. I'm inventing the conversation as it's occurring. So we say that language is not about exchanging information. And you all, you know this. So forgive me if I'm repeating some things that you already know, but we know that language is not about sharing information. Life is about inventing a life together. Language is about inventing in the moment our beingness together. And in that, it happens in the present moment. So being present to presence allows for a space of all possibility. And when that possibility is there, then with our clients and with ourselves, we can use the real power of language, which is to create, which is to invent. We began to have a kind of authorship in the moment in our participation together. So in listening then, listening is active, we can say. And that it's not a passive act at all. As you are hearing, so two things, there's the physical hearing, and then there's the listening. So as you are listening now, you are interpreting all that I am saying. So I could basically say that you're not listening me at all, just like I'm not listening you. I'm listening my interpretations of you. Like I look at you and I said, oh, okay, there she is. And she said this and she has her head this way. And I'm bringing all the meaning to that. And you have seen this many times, I'm sure, with your clients, is I think one thing is happening. And then when I ask one question, I began to see that what I thought was happening wasn't what was happening at all. So I have my assessments about what's going on. And if I'm not clear that they're just my assessments, then I began to interact with people as if my assessments are what's so versus assessments. And again, this is the power of language, to check out, to ground the assessments, to look and see if the assessments are what's happening, and knowing that I can only assess life out of my particular interpretation, out of my worldview, which is where the compassion comes in for me. To have deep compassion for what it means to live together on this tiny planet, and to have the kind of honor and respect that everyone is interpreting the world in the only way that they can. And my role as a coach, and my role as a leader, my role as a friend, is to begin to listen in such a way that people can listen their own interpretations and their own meanings. And when people can begin to listen themselves in that way, something starts to emerge as what we call dignity. The kind of dignity that allows people to have their wholeness and to find their voice amongst the many voices that are there. So I have any questions before I go to a little slide presentation that I put together? Questions, comments? Should I just select someone to ask them what's happening? No? Let me see.
Betty, this is
Yes.
Nancy. Hi. So when you read the poem, I had all this visual happening, and it was like circles within circles, over looping circles and circles. So it became a real experience of not just seeing that, but feeling that happening in my body. And so that was something that was really interesting to me as I was listening to everybody else's, what they were sharing about the poem. And so I love what you've been saying now, how everything emerges from the sharing then, and our listening to each other about what that poem was.
It's very powerful what you're saying, because as you share that, something happened for me, and it happens, and I can say it happened for the rest of us too. It shifted interpretations, because interpretations emerge, they arise, they disappear, they go to the background, they come to the foreground. And then when we're speaking together, it allows for a deeper meaning, a deeper possibility of our dwelling together. So you were experiencing kinesthetically,
Yes.
we could say. You were feeling. And in the NLP world, they say we got kinesthetics, we got visuals, and then we got auditory. But we have all those modalities, and we live in one more than we live in the other. So with you, I heard the pictures, you got the pictures, and then the kinesthetic in your body. So thank you. Very good. Now, what are you hearing me say?
Well, this is Scott. I just wanted to say, we talk about words create worlds, and this aspect, the point that you brought out, that language creates reality and creates things. It's just as simple as the company that I work for calling its employees associates instead of employees. The words that we use are very important to create attitudes, feelings, interpretations. And we can use negative language to do hurtful things, and we can use positive language to build things up. So I thought it was a really good point that we use language primarily as creation rather than as communication. I thought that was great.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
I'm just going to
Go ahead.
add a little bit to what Scott just said. I think we're co-creating based on everything that's emerging in the conversation.
Yes. That's a conversation I have with many of my friends. Is it co-creation or is it creation? And as you know, if we live in the Cartesian world, subject object, then we could say it's co-creation. And my work has led me to ontology, where it's a space of creation. And then, yes, it's exactly what you're saying, is co-creation. But again, it comes back to, who do you say you are? If you say that you are this separate being over here, and if you say that you are, I'm going in a conversation I don't want to have this morning. But very good, thank you. So again, just that conversation, and it happened in a conversation. So conversations allow us to bring. You got someone? Okay, very good. So again, we're learning that language co-creates or it creates. But we can say, but language as action is what I've been looking at. And I believe this is what happens in the world of coaching, that language is action. And language as action, both as action and as reflection, allows for people to begin to think in a different way, begin to become the creators or co-creators of their world. And I don't mean world like a physical world, but their worlds that we engage in together. And in that, it becomes one of the most powerful, it's not an instrument, but it is one of the most powerful aspects of our lives, language itself. Like both people said here, is this an associate or they are an employee? Is this my friend or is this my partner? All of that creates something in the listening of not just the two people who are involved, but in the listening of a community. Like you used the word community before. This is a community. And what makes this a community? Someone is chatting. Okay, what makes this a community? And is the community a shared language, a shared way of being, a shared set of interpretations? So what is community? Is it a way that we commune together, that we participate together? Do we have certain values that we have together? Well, what is community? And that becomes a whole nother conversation, just what is community? So thank you. I'm going to look at let's see. Somebody wrote something. Should I look at this or keep talking?
She just had a lot of noise where she is, so she was sharing about your previous question. It seems to me that listening is a kind of meta-interpretation. By listening to things you say, my own interpretations linked to my own vision, your meaning and mine, and those, what I believe are mine, but I have learned of others to the infinite. It doesn't stop.
Okay, very good, very good.
From Rennie.
From Rennie. Rennie from Mexico City?
Sounds like he or she knows who you are. So.
Hi, Rennie. Great to hear from you. Good. Yes. So interpretation is many layers to interpretation, and that's one of them. But we interpret. We are born into an already existing interpretation of what it is to be human. And as you look at me in terms of, you see that I am of a Black woman orientation, and I have certain interpretations about life that I was born into, from my mother, my father, the community I was born into. So we can say that has to do with my historicity. And every human being has a history. So, and those interpretations, we didn't choose, let's say we were born into them as they were going on, or being here in the United States. And we have some people from Canada, we have people from other places. But being here in the United States, there's an interpretation of what it is to be a United States citizen. I've learned not to say being an American, because when I go to Mexico, they say, well, this is America too. But again, to say in the United States. So those interpretations that we're born into, what it is to be a man, what it is to be a woman, what it is to be a citizen, what it is to be anything, that was there before we took our first breath. And a part of coaching, as I see it, especially ontological coaching, has to do with being present. Again, being present to those conversations, those interpretations, and not being had by them. Opening a new space so that we can then declare, have some authority to say who and what we are. And we are not shaped only by those conversations, those interpretations that have been around for thousands of years. So yes, what are those? And as I work with people, and I'm pretty sure you do too, we start to look at this whole notion of what is a vow. You know, a vow is like what people is sacred to us. It becomes to say, I vow, like our vows when we get married. It's a sacred vow. Or a vow to be a vegetarian, or vow to be a monk, or vow to be any of these things that we say, and it's a little different than a promise. But that vow shapes us in a way. Or your vow to be a coach, your vow to serve. At some moment, I'm going to say, in these interpretations, the many, many, many interpretations that we live in, you stood for one of these interpretations like a vow. And it became authentic for you, authentic in a way that it gave you direction. It began to shape you. And in the shaping of you, then you started to take actions that were consistent and congruent with the vows that you made. And when we don't act congruently and honor the vows that we make, then there's suffering. It's like we're out of integrity with ourselves and with our lives. And when we can't, and this is happening in language, not language just words, but language like the impact of language to shape. And then we give people many opportunities in the coaching world to observe, to be present to listen, the vows or the declarations that they made, and to align their lives with those, or to let them go. You know, we're not restricted by our saying as long as we're aware of it. But even if we're not aware of certain sayings, it's still having power in our lives. And I'm saying like a vow, like a declaration, like a stand, like this is who I am, this is what my life is. I'm lazy becomes a kind of vow, a declaration. And so we say, and it's as long as we're saying and not present to those interpretations, our lives then become shallow in a sense. And shallow in the sense that we have no authenticity with which to author our lives. And so we lose ourselves. We lose ourselves in the drift of what can be, and we lose ourselves in the drift of conversations like there's something wrong with me, there's something wrong with it, there's something wrong with them, but there's nothing wrong except we're not fully present anymore to our own saying, our own speaking, and therefore our own listening. So then listening has power. Because in the listening, I began to listen my declarations, my promises, my requests, my assertions, all that I say about life, and at the same time knowing that I am fundamentally blind at the same time. So both are going on. And this is where the compassion can come in for ourselves and for our clients. But we'll look at this. Let me see if I can find it. Let's see. So I go share screen. Yes. Here we go. I love this quote. People love to talk but hate to listen. Listening is not merely not talking, though even that is beyond most of our powers. It means taking rigorous human interest in what is being told us. You can listen like a blank wall or like a splendid auditorium where every sound comes back full and richer. I say this is who coaches are. They listen in a way that people can listen their own listening. And it comes back to them much fuller and much richer. And then they begin to experience and know in a way that most people don't know that they have choice about their life. And life then is about whether it's their relationships in business and work, love, marriage, death, dying, all of that. And we become a space, a disclosive space for people to listen what was never listened before about their possibilities. So let me see. There are two places we can live in the world: honoring myself as my word, or living as my circumstances and conditions. Neither one is wrong, but one will give you greater access to power. And I mean the power to create your life and to have the people that you serve create their lives. So we'll look at these. Honoring myself as my word has to do with asking the question of what's possible. And then there's another listening, which is like resignation, called there is nothing I can do. And we began to see this not only in our individual lives, but in companies. If you worked in a company, there can be an ongoing conversation called there's nothing that can be done here. And inside of that conversation, there's not much possibility until we can get people to the place of asking the question of what is possible. On honoring my word, myself as my word, there's a place called I'm responsible. And then I can choose what I'm committed to. And the conversations that we began to have are, how did I create this? Not like blame, because there's a whole nother conversation that people live in blame. But what's working, what's not working, what action can I take? I can, I will, I am. And then on the other side, I have conversations based on my judgments and opinions. And I don't even know they're my judgments and opinions. Like I wish, I want, I should. I hope things will change. Anybody ever had that one working with clients? I hope things will change, Betty. I really do. I wish things would be different. I like, I dislike. Nothing wrong with that conversation. It's just not an effective conversation for action. And then my commitments and my promises dictate my action. On the other side, my reasons, excuses, stories, and circumstances not only dictate, but they also justify my actions. Now, I have a good story about this morning and getting my PowerPoints for this call. It's a good story. It's a noble story. And yet at the same time, it's a story. And I'm very fortunate that I have a great team who was up early this morning helping me with these PowerPoints. So thank you, team. And then I create the future with my requests and promises. As we know, a request then opens up the space for action. And then the promises inside of that, with that, pulls me, moves me in a direction of effective actions. My problems are problems, and I'm resigned about them. I don't know if you've been following our elections here in the United States, and I won't have a political conversation. But again, the kind of listening that goes on in that conversation and what I'm listening for, what can be done. And I can get on the phone for 10 or 12 hours with anyone in my community and have a long conversation about the assessments, negative assessments about what's happening in our country politically. I don't know what difference it makes, not much, but it's a good conversation. And then I invent conversations that create openings for the world to occur. So we're saying it's an occurring world, that the world is not fixed. And we create the world with action, and we're asking what is possible and what can be done. I have conversations about how things are, why things should happen, why things didn't happen, and why things probably won't happen. I've worked in a business, quite a few of them, where this conversation is, people don't actually say it out loud, but it's something like, this is just another, what did they call it? Flavor of the month, flavor of the year, bringing these consultants and these coaches in here, and not much is going to happen anyway. And until that conversation is shifted, it becomes almost impossible to accomplish anything. And then on this other side, you ask the question, what's my commitment? Who do I get to be, and what actions do I take to create the results that we are committed to? And I reinvent myself to accomplish what I intend. And then quite often the conversation on the other side is what's wrong with them, what's wrong with it, and what's wrong with me. And have you ever heard that conversation before? If you've ever said it about yourself, even what's wrong with me, and it takes you in a direction, because whenever you're asking the question, this is interpretation and listening again, of what's wrong with me, you're going to come up with something, because the question is determining your response. So again, coaches listen from what's possible and what can be done. And when we're not listening from that place, what we want to do is give people solutions to problems that can't be solved in that way, in terms of what can be done. It is what's possible inside of the what's possible conversation. Then a new listening starts to emerge. A new speaking starts to emerge. And your organization in ICF, in coaching itself, is a new conversation. I took my first coaching course, as you were told, in 1980 with Fernando Flores. And it wasn't this kind of coaching at all, I got to tell you. Not like this. But it was a powerful conversation that I, at that moment, made a choice to immerse myself in, because I saw what was possible. Not just for producing more results, but for how we could dwell together and live together as human beings, with honor, with dignity, with respect, and with possibility. And given my background as a transformational trainer, this was great. And so as we moved on more and more and I started to study ecology and mindfulness, I began to listen, but what it means to be aware of our meanings and interpretations, and what are the meanings and interpretations that we can have in our lives that would have us live together with more harmony and peace on our planet. And to move away from trying to get value, but move away to producing value. And began to ask the question, what are the concerns? Like, what are the concerns of people today that are distinct even from the concerns of people even last year on our planet? You know, we got some concerns, the environment, we got all kinds of political threats and other things that are happening that are not new. But what are the concerns today, and how can we address those concerns? And so the ontological approach gets to the heart of what matters, which is building community and communing in such a way that our interpretations, again, are honored, and then we can begin to author new interpretations. So any questions or comments before we move on? We don't have much time left, but any thoughts from you? What are you listening? Because remember, what's coming out of my mouth is not so important. That's what you're listening. Anyone?
Yes. May you say more about listening the listener.
Yes. So listening then is another way of saying interpretations. And that as you, even now, as I'm speaking, there is an interpretive aspect of you that's interpreting everything that's being said. So, and in mindfulness, especially when we begin to listen, these interpretations, these meanings, then a clearing opens up. And the clearing then becomes an empty space for a new interpretation or modified interpretation, but I like to call it a new interpretation to be present, to be listened, because interpretations are constantly emerging and we don't always listen them because we're not always present. Is this? Hi. Tell me, what are you listening?
What I'm listening is the flow of awareness, of consciousness, which is a constant flow of different elements of the consciousness. Well, we might call them interpretations, thoughts, skandhas, with different ways to impulses, intuitions, images, feelings, sensations.
Yes.
Yes, it's the experience of being.
And with the experience of being that's constantly being interpreted.
Yes, flowing and listening to that.
Yes. Now, what country are you in? Where are you?
Sorry?
Where are you? Where
I'm based.
Where?
Where I'm based in Barcelona, in Spain.
Oh, okay. No, I'm just listening. I see these giraffes behind you, and I have some of those same giraffes that I got in Kenya when I was on a safari over there a few years ago. So that's why I was asking, who are you?
Yes, well, I'm North African. I'm from Morocco.
Oh, okay.
I'm also French.
Also French. Now, I can make up a lot about that, huh? In my interpretive nature, I can go French, la 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 la, Moroccan, la la la, North Africa, la 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 la. I look and I see 3 giraffes, and I'm going. I said, so instead of me saying what I'm making up, let me just ask a question. So that's why I was asking. It was something that was familiar that I saw. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Anyone else?
I love how, just from what you've been saying and listening to the conversation between you and Suraj, opened up whole new levels of interpretation and meaning, and my head feels like it's going to explode.
Yeah, and it's quick. So that's so we're blinded to our interpretations. And I see 3 giraffes, I bring meaning. But there is no meaning in the giraffe. It's the meaning that I bring. And I bring it because I have a distinction called those kinds of giraffes. But if I didn't have that distinction, if I'd never seen those giraffes before, that would have been, it may not have appeared at all. So the interpretive nature of being then allows for a seeing, a showing of what everyone is not seeing. Everyone's not aware of that. So again, as I'm moving through the world and communicating and participating, I'm shaping. I'm more shaping than what I acknowledge quite often. So thank you. Anyone else?
So let me give you one interpretation more. The giraffes are coming from Indonesia.
From Indonesia. See? Yes. And I've traveled there too, but I don't have any Indonesian giraffes. And they're distinct, huh? Indonesian giraffes and Kenyan giraffes.
And little wood ones.
The little wood ones, yeah, because I would probably, if we put them together, we'd see that they've been carved differently. And that's the part of interpretation and distinction as well. It allows you to see what can't be seen. And when the people we work with can see what can't be seen, then it becomes a whole nother possibility. So yes, thank you. Anyone else before we start to wrap up?
Donnell, this is Ron Dosey. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, Ron.
Yes, I have a question. I'm working on trying to help someone else be in the space that I'm trying to help create for them. I'm using the word trying a lot here because at every angle, it's like not getting there. It's like the person is, they see it, they don't see it. They see it, they don't see it. And so I'm looking at myself to say, what am I creating for myself? How am I creating this space? And the connection isn't happening. It's like I'm not really getting it. I'm not seeing to what degree my power ends and the power to create something for them begins. And to what degree I'm just out of control in the situation and have to be not attached to it and surrender and say that's it. So when it comes to how committed I am to coaching or committed to facilitating something greater in someone else, I'm torn by where to start, where to stop, and when am I trying to do too much versus being what I need to be. And these points of distinction between there are questions in my mind right now.
Okay, very good. Those are great questions, Ron. And it would take a little bit longer to answer that question in the time that we have, because we do have a time commitment. And I can say I listen your sincerity and your care for this person. And when you, in this model of being with people, this way of being with people, which has to do with mindfulness, that you're mindful that something is happening and something isn't happening is the first start. Makes sense. And to begin to, you're listening. And in the listening, something will start to emerge. I said before, that could not emerge unless you were listening. I don't have an answer, but I will ask you, what is it this person is wanting? And don't answer right now, because like I said, we only have 1 minute. But as a question for yourself to begin to listen, what is this person? What do they want in their life? Like really, what are their concerns? What do they care about? And how can we facilitate together them having what matters most to them? So it becomes a different question than trying to fix someone or get them to do something, but become a space for people to find their own, which is what I love about coaching. It is about people finding their own awareness, finding their own, discovering their own possibilities, declaring them, and then acting on them. But thank you for the question. And it's 9:55 my time, California time. And I want to thank this wonderful organization. Thank all of you for listening. And what my request of you is that as you move through your day, listen your own listening. And when you find yourself not listening, just like in mindfulness, pull yourself back. What meaning, what interpretation am I bringing to this? Again, thank you. I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Betty. I think I see a few minds blown around the screen, so that's wonderful. We always appreciate mind-blowingness. So thank you for bringing your being to this call. And just a few quick announcements for the folks on the call. As Anita mentioned, we have Our next forum call, which is a month from now on Wednesday, May 18th, is an opportunity to see several of the presenters that are going to be at our conference in June. We're going to do a little bit of a taste test to whet your appetites for the conference. So we'd love to have you all back to be with us for that. And if you want any details about the conference, which is in Phoenix, June 15th to 17th, it's all set. All of our speakers are listed on our website at actoonline.org. There is still time to register for that and to register for the PCC marker training, which is the day before the conference starts on June 14th in Phoenix as well. So we'd love to see you all there, and thanks for being here today. And thanks again, Betty.
And thank you. And I just want, if people want to know any more about me and my work, I'm going to put this up so they can see it. Wait, not that one.
And we had someone ask, this is being recorded, so if people want to watch this recording afterwards, it will be on our website at actoonline.org.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.